She was on her knees. Not because she was weak. Not because she had fallen. But because the woman standing above her had just shoved her face first into the marble floor of Seoul's most exclusive penthouse, in front of 40 of Korea's wealthiest and most powerful people, and not a single one of them moved to help her. Her simple cotton sundress was torn at the shoulder. Her braids had come loose from their bun and hung around her face like a curtain, and through that curtain, she could see everything. The designer heels stepping backward to avoid the splash of spilled wine spreading toward them like blood. The phones rising into the air, cameras pointed at her, recording her humiliation for entertainment. The smiles. The whispers. The cruelty dressed in couture. "Go back to whatever dusty little swamp you crawled out of," the woman above her said, loud enough for every corner of the room to hear. "You smell like marsh water and poverty. You don't belong here. You will never belong here. And if I see your face in my world again, I will make sure you regret the day you stepped foot in this country." The room laughed. Actually laughed. 40 grown adults, each worth more than most small nations, laughed at a woman on the floor. The woman's name was Cha Yanawa. Heiress. Socialite. Daughter of one of the most feared men in Korean high society. And she had just made the single biggest mistake of her life. Because across that room, leaning against the bar with a glass of whiskey in his hand and eyes so cold they could freeze the Han River in July, the most dangerous man in South Korea was watching. He didn't laugh. He didn't intervene. He simply watched, with the quiet, patient attention of a predator who hadn't yet decided whether to hunt. His name was Dohan. And what nobody in that room knew, not the woman on the floor, not the woman standing over her, not the crowd of laughing elites, not even the lethal man at the bar, was that the woman on her knees owned that penthouse. She owned the building it sat in. She owned the company that employed half their husbands. And within 72 hours, she would own their futures. Every single one. Her name was Adora. And this is her story. Now before we get into what happens next, and trust me, what happens next is going to absolutely wreck you, I need you to do one thing. Hit that subscribe button right now. Tap the like button. Because this story has twists you will not see coming, romance that will leave you breathless, and revenge so devastating you'll feel it in your bones. You are not ready. But let's go anyway. To understand what happened in that penthouse and everything that came after, we need to go back. Not to Seoul. To a place most people have never heard of. Meridian Island sits off the coast of Georgia, connected to the mainland by a single crumbling bridge that floods during high tide. Population 412. No stoplights. No chain restaurants. No cell towers until 2015. The island is part of the Gullah-Geechee Corridor, a stretch of coastal communities descended from enslaved West Africans who preserved their language, their traditions, and their fierce independence for over 3 centuries. This is where Adora grew up. She was raised by her grandmother, Neoma, in a weathered clapboard house surrounded by live oaks draped in Spanish moss. Neoma was a force of nature, a small, fierce Nigerian-born woman who had married a Gullah man named Joseph Akwem in 1971 and planted herself on that island like a tree that refused to be moved. She ran a restaurant called Neoma's Table out of the front room of their house, serving a fusion of Nigerian and low-country cuisine that drew people from as far as Savannah, an hour's drive away. Politicians ate there. Fishermen ate there. Once, a food writer from Atlanta drove 3 hours, ate Neoma's peppered crab rice, and wept openly at the table. Adora's parents had died in a car accident when she was 4. Her brother Dubam, who was 7 at the time, had been in the car too. He didn't survive. At least, that's what Adora had been told for 22 years. She grew up barefoot on that island, catching blue crabs in the marsh, speaking Igbo and Gullah interchangeably, reading everything she could get her hands on by the light of a kerosene lamp when the power went out, which was often. By 12, she was building computers from salvaged parts. By 16, she had taught herself to code and built an app that caught the eye of a Silicon Valley investor who flew to Meridian Island on a private plane, landed on a dirt road, and offered her $2 million in seed funding. She took the money. She did not leave the island. By 19, her company, which she called Aurea Global, was generating more revenue than firms run by people 3 times her age. By 22, she controlled interests in artificial intelligence, biotechnology, rare earth mining, cybersecurity, and private intelligence across 3 continents. By 25, which was her current age, her net worth exceeded $14 billion. And her face had never appeared in a single publication. She operated from shadows. She built from silence. Her name existed only in encrypted files and the memories of the 6 people on Earth who knew her true identity. To the rest of the world, Aurea Global was a faceless entity. And Adora was a girl from a swamp island that most maps didn't bother to include. But Adora was more than a strategist and a coder. Growing up on Meridian Island meant growing up tough. The island had no police presence. Disputes were settled by hand or by will. When she was 14, a man twice her size tried to rob Neoma's table at knife point. Adora broke his wrist with a cast iron skillet and held him on the floor until the mainland sheriff arrived 40 minutes later. By 17, she had begun formal training, Krav Maga under a retired Israeli operative who had settled in Savannah, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at a gym in Beaufort, close-quarters combat techniques from a former Marine who owed her a favor after she rebuilt his business's entire cybersecurity system for free. By 25, she was as dangerous with her hands as she was with her mind. She just never needed anyone to know it. Until someone came for the only thing her armor couldn't protect. 6 months before that night in Seoul, Adora received a call that shattered her. Neoma's table was being destroyed. Not by a storm. Not by time. By design. A holding company had purchased the land beneath the restaurant and tripled the lease overnight. Suppliers who had served Neoma for decades were pressured into cutting ties. Health inspectors who had never found a single violation in 30 years arrived with pages of fabricated infractions. Insurance was cancelled. The small bank that held Neoma's modest loan called it in without warning. It was surgical. Coordinated. Designed to crush one small restaurant and the 83-year-old woman who ran it. And it worked. Neoma collapsed in her kitchen on a Tuesday afternoon. Stroke. When Adora arrived at the hospital on the mainland, her grandmother was conscious but diminished. The fire that had burned in Neoma's eyes for 83 years had been replaced by something Adora had never seen there before. Defeat. They took my kitchen, NWAM, Neoma whispered. I built it with these hands. Your grandfather and I, we built it together. And they took it like it was nothing. Adora held her grandmother's hand, felt the frailty of it, and made a vow. Not out loud. Neoma would not have wanted drama. She made it in silence, in the deepest, most dangerous chamber of her heart. She would find who did this. And she would unmake them. Her intelligence team traced the attack through 17 shell companies across 4 jurisdictions. Every thread led to Seoul. Every thread led to a name. The Kwon Syndicate. And at its peak sat Kwon Dohan. 32 years old. CEO of Kwon Enterprises on paper. Underneath, he commanded a criminal empire spanning 3 generations. Drugs, weapons, illegal gambling, money laundering through legitimate businesses. He was described as ice in human form. He spoke softly, and people obeyed. He smiled rarely, and when he did, someone was about to suffer. But buried in her surveillance files, Adora found a detail that didn't fit. Every Sunday, without fail, Kwon Dohan visited a small orphanage outside Seoul. He went alone. No bodyguards. He stayed for hours. He read to the children. The coldest crime lord in Korea read bedtime stories to orphans. It was a contradiction. And contradictions were cracks. And Adora was very good at finding cracks. She landed at Incheon wearing jeans, a faded sweatshirt, and sneakers. No entourage. No security. She looked exactly like what everyone in Seoul would assume she was. A young black woman from rural America, probably overwhelmed, probably lost. She was neither. Her contact, Rim Boyong, a former Korean intelligence operative, was waiting at the apartment in Mangwon-dong. You look like a backpacker, Boyong said. Good. Dohan is not stupid. And neither am I. To everyone in this city, I'm invisible. A country girl from an island nobody's heard of. That's my weapon, Boyong. Their blindness is my blade. Boyong handed her a folder. The Kwan Syndicate is hosting a private gathering at their Yongsan penthouse in 3 days. I secured you an invitation. But you'll be completely alone in enemy territory. Adora opened the folder. Perfect. Normal people don't say that. Normal people don't build empires from swamp islands. The night of the event arrived. Adora chose her grandmother's old sundress, cotton with small blue flowers, slightly faded from years of washing. Flat sandals. Small hoop earrings. She looked like someone who had wandered into the wrong building. The door attendant stared. Name? Adora. I'm on the list. He checked with visible skepticism, found her name, and stepped aside. She walked into the penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows. The Han River glittering below. Art on the walls worth more than Meridian Island's entire economy. Beautiful people in beautiful clothes radiating the particular confidence that comes from never having been told no. The whispers started before she was 10 steps into the room. She felt them like needles. She catalogued every face, every reaction, building a mental architecture of the room's social hierarchy. Then Cha Yanawa materialized. Tall. Stunning in the engineered way of someone with unlimited access to Seoul's finest dermatologists, stylists, and surgeons. White Dior gown. Red lips. Eyes that scanned Adora with the detached contempt of someone evaluating whether an insect was worth stepping on. Who are you? Yanawa asked. Adora. Yanawa tasted the name like spoiled milk. And what are you doing here? This is a private event for people of significance. I was invited. Yanawa's eyes traveled down the sundress, the flat sandals, the bare fingers. Sweetheart, I don't know who made the mistake of putting you on the list, but look around. Do you see anyone who looks like you? Do you see anyone dressed like they just finished feeding chickens? This is not your world. You should leave before you embarrass yourself further. I think I'll stay. Something in Adora's calm, steady refusal triggered a reaction in Yanawa that went beyond irritation. It was rage, pure and territorial, the rage of a woman who had never been defied by someone she considered beneath contempt. Yanawa grabbed Adora's arm and shoved, hard. Adora hit the marble floor on her knees. Her dress tore. Wine from a nearby guest's glass splashed across the stone. The room went silent. Then came the laughter. The phones. The recording. And then those words. Go back to whatever dusty little swamp you crawled out of. Adora lifted her head slowly. Her eyes found Yanawa's and held them with a stillness so absolute that Yanawa's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. I'll remember you, Adora said. She stood. She did not fix her dress. She did not wipe the wine from her knee. She turned and walked toward the exit, spine straight, head high, leaving silence in her wake. As she passed the bar, a hand caught her wrist. The contact was electric. A current that shot through both of them, sudden and violent and impossible to ignore. Kwon Dohan. Up close, he was devastating. Sharp jawline. Dark eyes that held hers like he was trying to decode her at the molecular level. He wore a black suit like armor, but his grip on her wrist was careful, almost gentle. Wait, he said. Low. Quiet. The kind of voice that didn't need volume. Adora looked at his hand, then at his face. Let go. Are you all right? I didn't come here for pity. I'm not offering pity. He released her wrist but his eyes held on. What she did was wrong. Then why didn't you stop it? The question hit him visibly. Something flickered behind his eyes, fast and unreadable. Because I wanted to see what you would do. And? You were the only person in this room with any dignity. He paused. That includes me. Adora studied him for 3 heartbeats. Then she turned and walked out without another word, but she felt his gaze on her back like a hand pressed between her shoulder blades, warm and heavy and impossible to forget. In the elevator, her hands began to shake. Not from fear. From the effort of restraint. Every cell screamed to march back in and show them all who they had just humiliated. But this was not the time. The time would come. And when it came, they would wish they had been kinder to the girl from the swamp. She called Boyong from the car. Everything on Cha Yanawa. Her father, Cha Il-sung. Financial records, personal communications, every secret, every skeleton. I want it all by morning. What happened? Someone volunteered to be my example. The following Sunday, Adora went to the orphanage. She arrived carrying a bag of books, Nigerian folktales, and Gullah stories she had loved as a child, tales of Anansi and Brr Rabbit and clever women who outsmarted kings. The staff accepted her volunteer offer gratefully. She was reading to a circle of children when the front door opened and Kwon Dohan walked in. He stopped. She looked up. Something passed between them that neither could name. You, he said. Me, she said. The children swarmed him. Dohan Appa, Dohan Appa. They grabbed his hands, his jacket. He let himself be pulled into the circle, but his eyes never left Adora. He sat across from her. A 5-year-old crawled into his lap. He held the child absently, still watching her. You volunteer here, she said. You don't. I do now. She held up the book she'd been reading. Do you know Anansi stories? No. Anansi is a spider. Small. Overlooked. Every animal in the forest underestimates him. And he outsmarts them all, every single time. She paused. I've always loved Anansi. Something shifted in his expression. Not a smile. A recognition. I can see why. They spent the afternoon reading to children. When the sun began to set and they walked outside together, Dohan said, There's a tea shop around the corner. I know. I saw it on the way in. Would you? Yes. He almost smiled. You didn't let me finish. You were going to ask me for tea. I was going to say yes. I just saved us 4 seconds. They sat in that tea shop for 3 hours. And something happened that terrified them both. They told the truth. She told him about Meridian Island. The marsh. The crabs. The kerosene lamp. The grandmother who ran a restaurant out of her living room and fed anyone who was hungry regardless of whether they could pay. She told him about growing up the only child of a dead family, raised by a woman who loved hard enough for 10 parents. He told her about growing up Kwon. About a father who measured love in obedience. About a mother who sang him to sleep every night until she died when he was 15, and how the music stopped that day and never came back. About inheriting an empire of blood at 25 and spending every day since wondering if he was its master or its prisoner. Why don't you walk away? Adora asked. His hands wrapped around his teacup. Because the last time someone in my family tried to walk away, they disappeared. My uncle. I was 12. One day he was there. The next day he wasn't. My father never spoke his name again. He looked at her. This life doesn't let you leave, Adora. It holds on. Everything lets go eventually. You just have to be strong enough to pull. Is that an Anansi lesson? That's a Neoma lesson. He studied her face with that intense, decoding gaze. Who are you, Adora? Really? A girl from a swamp island. Nothing more. I don't believe that. You don't have to believe it. You just have to accept it. He couldn't. She could see that. He couldn't accept that this woman sitting across from him, speaking with the precision of a strategist and the warmth of a poet, was simply what she appeared to be. But he let it go. For now. When they parted that evening, he said her name one more time. Adora. Like he was committing it to something deeper than memory. She walked away with her heart beating too fast and a voice in her head screaming that she was making a catastrophic mistake. Over the next 3 weeks, the game intensified on every front. On one side, Adora's financial war machine hummed to life. Her CFO in London, a razor-sharp Ghanaian-British man named Kofi, began acquiring Cha Il-sung's corporate debt through a web of intermediaries. Her legal team in New York compiled evidence of Il-sung's corruption. Her intelligence team mapped the Cha family's vulnerabilities with surgical precision. On the other side, her meetings with Dohan continued. The orphanage every Sunday. Tea afterward. And then the tea became dinner. And the dinners became long walks through Seoul's quieter neighborhoods, Bukshan and Ikseondong and the narrow alleys of Yeoljiro, where the city still remembered what it had been before the glass towers came. They talked about everything except what mattered most. She didn't tell him about Aurea Global. He didn't tell her about the syndicate's operations. They existed in a careful, fragile space between truth and pretense, and both of them knew it couldn't last but neither could stop. The escalation happened on a Wednesday night. Dohan had invited her to his home, a restored hanok in Songbukdong that he had rebuilt with his own hands over 3 years. He cooked for her Korean dishes his mother had taught him. Doenjangjigi. Japchae. Perfectly shaped mandu. The domesticity of it, this man who commanded a criminal empire standing in his kitchen crimping dumplings, made something ache in Adora's chest. They ate on the floor. The ondal heating warmed the wood beneath them. Rain began to fall outside. Tell me something real, she said. Something you've never told anyone. He set down his chopsticks. A long silence. Then, I'm drowning. I've been drowning for years and I've gotten so good at holding my breath that everyone thinks I'm swimming. He looked at her. You're the first person who's made me want to come up for air. Dohan. I know this is complicated. I know there are things between us that we're not saying. But I need you to know that whatever this is, it's the only real thing in my life. Everything else is performance. You're not. She reached across the table and took his hand. The contact sent that same electric current through both of them, and this time neither of them let go. I'm going to kiss you, he said. Tell me not to. I can't. Why? Because I've been wanting you to since the tea shop. He moved around the table. His hands cupped her face. His thumbs traced her cheekbones with a tenderness that seemed impossible from hands that had done the things his had done. He leaned in slowly, deliberately, and when their lips met, the world collapsed to a single point of heat and hunger and devastating honesty. Her fingers gripped his shirt. His hands slid into her braids. The kiss deepened until they were both trembling with the force of what they'd been holding back. He pulled her into his lap, and she went willingly, wrapping herself around him like she was trying to climb inside the warmth he was offering. When they finally broke apart, foreheads pressed together, breathing ragged, he whispered, "Stay tonight." If I stay. I know. There's no going back. I don't want to go back. I want to go forward. With you. She kissed him again, and this time she let go of every calculation, every strategy, every reason she should stop. He carried her to his bedroom, and they crossed the last boundary between them with a raw, devastating tenderness that undid them both. He undressed her slowly. Reverently. His lips traced the line of her collarbone, the curve of her shoulder, the soft skin behind her ear, and with every kiss, he whispered fragments, not words exactly, but sounds of worship, of disbelief, of a man discovering that he was capable of gentleness and terrified by it. She pulled him down to her and held his face in her hands and looked into his eyes and saw the boy who lost his mother, the man who lost himself, the soul that was starving for something it had been denied its entire life. I see you, she whispered. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. No one has ever seen me. I do. I see you, Dohan. They moved together like a conversation in a language that had no words, only breath and touch and the slow, devastating surrender of two people who had built their entire lives on control and were choosing, for the first time, to let go. When he said her name, it sounded like a prayer. When she arched into him, it felt like an answer. Afterward, lying tangled together in the warm darkness, his hand tracing the landscape of her hip, her head on his chest listening to his heartbeat slow from thunder to rain, she felt tears sliding into her braids. "What's wrong?" he murmured. "I have secrets, Dohan. Secrets that could destroy everything between us." His hands stilled. "Tell me." "Not tonight. Soon. But I need you to know that whatever happens, this was real. This moment. You and me. This was the most real thing I've ever experienced." He tightened his arm around her and pressed his lips to her forehead. "Then that's enough. For now." But it wasn't enough. And they both knew it. The collision came 9 days later, and it came from a direction Adora never expected. Boyoung burst into her apartment at 6 in the morning, which Boyoung never did. Boyoung was composed. Boyoung was measured. Boyoung did not burst. "We found D," Boyoung said. Adora's blood went cold. Her team had been tracing the person who had authorized the attack on Neoma's table through the Kwon syndicate's internal systems. The authorization signatures all carried a code, DE. "Who is it?" Boyoung placed a photograph on the table. A man. Korean in appearance but with features that hinted at mixed heritage. Tall. Late 20s. Sharp eyes that carried a familiar intensity, an intensity Adora recognized because she saw it in the mirror every morning. "His name within the Cha organization is Dohan Park," Boyoung said. "But that's not his real name." "What's his real name?" Boyoung's voice went soft. The softness of someone delivering a wound. "Duba McQueen." The world cracked. "My brother is dead," Adora whispered. "He died when I was 4. "He didn't die." Boyoung laid out the documents. Medical records. Immigration files. Adoption papers, forged. He was critically injured. Spent months in a hospital. Your grandmother was told he didn't survive. The records were falsified. Cha Il-sung was conducting business in the US at the time. He had connections in the hospital system. He took Dubum, brought him to Korea, raised him as his protege. Changed his name. Changed his identity. And told him what? Boyoung hesitated. Told him his family abandoned him. That his grandmother chose to save you and left him to die. The sound that came from Adora was primal. It was grief and rage fused into something that transcended both. She swept the table clear with one arm, sending files and cups crashing to the floor, and stood there shaking, breathing through her teeth, her hands curled into fists so tight her nails drew blood from her palms. Her brother was alive. Her brother had been stolen. Her brother had been twisted into a weapon against his own family by the man who stole him. And it was Dubum, using Cha Il-sung's access to Kwon syndicate resources, who had destroyed Neoma's table. Who had broken their grandmother's heart. Who had struck at the family he believed had thrown him away. "D.E.," Adora said, her voice barely controlled. "Duba McQueen." He signed with his own initials. Maybe deliberately. Maybe subconsciously. Either way, some part of him still knows who he is. "And Yanoa?" Adora's voice was a blade. "Where does she fit?" Yanoa has been Dubum's handler for years. She feeds his anger. She directs it. It was Yanoa who specifically suggested targeting Neoma's table. She told Dubum it would be justice, a way to hurt the family that had abandoned him. The woman who had shoved her to the floor. The woman who had called her a swamp creature. That woman had orchestrated the destruction of her grandmother's life and the weaponization of her own brother. Adora looked at Boyoung with eyes that had gone completely still. Completely cold. The eyes of a woman who had moved past fury into something far more dangerous. Certainty. "I need to tell Dohan," she said. Adora, think carefully. I'm done thinking. He deserves the truth. She went to the hammock that night. She stood in his kitchen, the same kitchen where he had made her dumplings, where he had kissed her for the first time, where she had felt safe for the first time in her adult life. And she told him everything. Aurea Global. The $14 billion. Why she had come to Seoul. What she had discovered about Dubum. All of it. When she finished, Dohan was standing across the kitchen. He had not moved during the entire confession. He had not interrupted. He had listened with the terrifying stillness of a man processing information that was rearranging every assumption he held. The silence lasted 45 seconds. It felt like 45 years. You came to destroy me, he said. His voice was flat. Emptied of everything. Yes. Every conversation. Every Sunday at the orphanage. Every time I opened my mouth and told you things I've never told another living soul. You were gathering intelligence. That's how it started. But. And the night we spent together. His voice cracked on this, just barely, a fracture in stone. Was that intelligence too? The accusation hit her like a physical blow. No. Dohan, no. That was. How do I know? He slammed his palm on the counter, and the sound cracked through the kitchen like a gunshot. How do I know anything you've ever said to me is true? You are literally a professional liar. You built a $14 billion empire on the ability to be invisible and manipulate from the shadows. How do I know I'm not just another target? Because I'm standing here. Her voice shook but held. I could have finished this from the shadows. I could have destroyed the Cha family, taken down your syndicate, gotten my brother back, and you would never have known my name. But I chose to stand in front of you and tell you the truth, knowing you might never forgive me, because I love you too much to keep lying to you. Don't. His voice was raw. Don't say that word right now. It's the truth. I don't know what your truth looks like anymore. He turned away from her and braced his hands on the counter, his head bowed, his shoulders carrying the weight of everything she had just placed on them. Leave. Dohan. Please. The word broke. It was the first time she had ever heard him say please, and the sound of it, desperate, wounded, barely held together, destroyed her. I can't look at you right now. I need you to leave. She left. She walked out of the hammock and into the Seoul night and made it 3 blocks before her legs gave out. She sat on a bench beside a convenience store, surrounded by the buzz of fluorescent lights and the distant hum of traffic, and she cried. Not the elegant, cinematic tears of a woman in control. The ugly, gasping, body-racking sobs of someone who had just lost the only thing money couldn't buy. 3 days passed. Adora heard nothing from Dohan. She threw herself into the mission, burning the pain as fuel. She called Kofi in London. Execute everything. Now. All of it. Are you certain? I have never been more certain of anything in my life. But the pain didn't go away. It sat in her chest like a stone, growing heavier with every hour of silence. On the 4th day, Boyong brought news that changed the calculus again. Yanawa knows about you and Dohan. She has sources inside his household staff. She's furious. Furious how? Furious enough to hire people. My contacts intercepted communications. She's paid 200 million won to have you eliminated. She wants it done before you can do any more damage. Adora processed this information with clinical calm. She wants me dead. Yes. Over a man she never had. Over power. Over the Chakwan alliance. Over everything her family stands to gain. You're a threat to all of it. Boyong paused. And Adora, Cha Il-sung knows. He didn't order it, but he's aware. He didn't stop it. Then we accelerate the timeline. I want the financial assault launched by morning and the prosecutorial files delivered by. She stopped. Outside her apartment window, a shadow moved across the fire escape that should not have been there. Adora's body went still. Her eyes stayed on Boyoung, but her senses expanded outward, absorbing the sounds beyond the room. A faint creak of metal. The whisper of fabric against brick. A second shadow, lower, near the front entrance of the building. Boyoung, Adora said quietly. How long ago did you intercept those communications? Boyoung's eyes widened as she understood the question. 6 hours. 6 hours is enough time to mobilize a team. The window exploded inward. Glass sprayed across the apartment. A man in black tactical gear came through the frame, compact and fast, a suppressed pistol in his hand. He swept the room and found Adora already moving. She had dropped below the line of the window the instant before the glass shattered. Her body remembered what her mind didn't need to think about. She seized the small table beside her and drove it upward into the man's weapon hand, knocking the pistol toward the ceiling. The suppressed shot punched into the plaster above her head. She rotated inside his guard, trapped his wrist against her forearm, and snapped her elbow into his throat. He choked, staggering, and she stripped the weapon from his hand with a disarming technique so clean it looked choreographed. The front door burst open. A second man. Bigger. He registered Adora holding his partner's weapon and lunged for her before she could turn it on him. He was fast, trained, but he expected a frightened woman. He did not expect the palm strike that met his chin with the full force of Adora's hip rotation behind it. His teeth cracked together. His head snapped back. She followed with a knee to his solar plexus that folded him in half, then drove his head downward into her rising knee. He hit the floor and didn't get up. The first man had recovered enough to pull a knife. He slashed at her, quick and vicious. Adora stepped offline, caught his knife hand by the wrist, twisted until the tendons screamed and the blade clattered to the floor, then leveraged his arm behind his back and drove him face first into the wall with enough force to crack the plaster around his skull. He slumped, unconscious. 7 seconds. Both men down. Adora stood in the wreckage of her apartment, glass in her braids, breathing controlled, the suppressed pistol held with professional ease at her side. Boyoung was pressed against the far wall, her own weapon drawn, staring at Adora with an expression that mixed admiration with something approaching awe. You could have mentioned you fight like that, Boyoung said. You never asked. Adora checked both men's pulses, then searched them. No identification. No phones. Professional. But one of them had a tattoo on his inner forearm, a small symbol that Boyoung recognized immediately. Cha Private Security, Boyoung confirmed. Yanawa's people. Adora looked at the unconscious men on her floor, then at the shattered window, then at the city beyond it. Her dress was torn. There was a thin cut on her forearm from the flying glass, bleeding lightly. Her hands were steady. She pulled out her phone. Before she could dial, it buzzed. Unknown number. Don't go outside tonight. Dohan's voice. Stripped bare. No mask. No ice. Just raw, urgent fear. Yanawa has people looking for you. I just found out. Stay inside, lock your doors. I'm sending protection. They're already here, Adora said. Silence on the line. What? 2 of them. Through my window about 90 seconds ago. Are you? His voice fractured. Adora, are you hurt? No. Are they? She looked at the 2 unconscious bodies on her floor. Very. Silence. Then, quietly, with something that sounded almost like a broken laugh, of course they are. I don't need your protection, Dohan. You're getting it anyway. Be angry at me tomorrow. Tonight, he stopped. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. I can't lose you. I've been trying to be angry enough to walk away and I can't do it. I can't even do it when I want to. That's never happened to me before and it's terrifying and I don't know what to do with it, but I know that when Boyoung's intel reached me 10 minutes ago, when I thought someone might hurt you, I couldn't breathe. I literally could not draw air into my lungs. So I'm sending protection. And I'm coming too. And you can yell at me when I get there, but I'm coming. The line went dead. 20 minutes later, 4 of Dohan's most trusted men positioned themselves outside Adora's building. Boyoung's team extracted the 2 unconscious attackers through the back entrance. And 30 minutes after that, Dohan himself walked through her door. He saw the broken window. The cracked plaster. The glass scattered across the floor. The thin line of blood on Adora's forearm where she hadn't yet bothered to clean the cut. His face went through something seismic, rage, then terror, then a desperate tenderness that broke through every wall he had rebuilt over the past 4 days. He crossed the room in 3 strides, took her face in his hands, and pressed his forehead to hers. I told you to leave, he said, his voice wrecked. You did. That was the stupidest thing I've ever done. And I've done very stupid things. Top 5, at least. I'm sorry. You should be. I'm also in love with you. Completely. Irrationally. Against every instinct I have. And I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. She gripped his wrists, holding his hands against her face. Her eyes burned, but she did not cry. She had cried enough on that bench outside the convenience store. This isn't going to be easy. Nothing about you has been easy since the moment I met you. I lied to you. You also just took down 2 armed men in your living room. I think we're past conventional relationship standards. His thumbs traced her cheekbones. Tell me we're okay. Tell me I didn't destroy this. She kissed him. Hard. With all the fury and relief and love and fear that had been building for 4 days of silence. He kissed her back like she was oxygen, like she was the surface of the water he'd been drowning beneath his entire life. When they broke apart, she whispered, "We're okay. But you ever tell me to leave again, I'm buying your building and evicting you. You probably already own my building. I own the block." He almost smiled. Then he looked at the blood on her arm and his expression went cold in a different way. The Kwon Dohan way. The way that preceded consequences. Yanawa sent them, he said. It was not a question. Yes. Then Yanawa and I are going to have a conversation. No. We're going to dismantle her entire world first. And then she's going to have a conversation with prosecutors. He looked at her, this woman who had just fought off 2 assassins and was calmly planning the strategic destruction of an empire while bleeding from the arm, and something in his expression settled into absolute, unshakable certainty. Together, he said. Together. Now listen, if this story has you screaming at your screen right now, I need you to do something for me. Smash that like button. Drop a comment telling me what you're feeling, because we are about to enter the part of this story where everything changes. And I mean everything. If you're not subscribed, what are you doing? Subscribe right now because you do not want to miss what comes next. The war on the Cha Empire began the next morning and it was devastating. At 9, 3 major institutional lenders simultaneously called in debts totaling 400 billion won, debts that Adora's team had quietly acquired over weeks. Cha Construction's stock dropped 18% before lunch. By noon, Korean prosecutors announced a formal investigation into Cha Il-sung based on meticulously documented evidence of bribery, fraud, and embezzlement delivered anonymously but so thorough that legal analysts called it the most comprehensive corruption file in Korean corporate history. But it wasn't just the financial assault. Dohan called a meeting of every significant figure in Korea's underworld. He stood before them in a private room in Gangnam and laid bare what Cha Il-sung had done. Using another man's syndicate resources without authorization. Kidnapping a child from a foreign country. Weaponizing that child against his own blood for 2 decades. The room listened in heavy silence. Then the most powerful man present, a silver-haired boss named Baek In-soo who had controlled Busan's underworld for 40 years, stood slowly from his chair. He looked at Dohan. He looked at the evidence on the table. And then he spat on the floor. A man who steals children, Baek said, is not a man. One by one, every boss in the room withdrew their support from Cha Il-sung. In their world, this was worse than any legal consequence. It meant total exile. It meant you were prey. By the end of the week, Cha Il-sung's personal assets were frozen. Board members had resigned. Partners had fled. The empire he had spent 30 years building was collapsing in real time. And then Adora revealed herself. Every major financial news outlet in the world simultaneously received a press package. The identity behind Aurea Global. Her photograph. Her biography. Her net worth. The full, staggering scope of what a girl from a swamp island had built from nothing. Seoul went into shock. The woman they had mocked. The woman they had shoved to the floor. The woman they had called a swamp creature. She was one of the most powerful human beings on the planet. Adora chose the Lotte Hotel Grand Ballroom for her press conference. She arrived in a black armored SUV, flanked by a 12-person security detail. She stepped out, and the cameras detonated. She wore a custom gown by a Nigerian-Korean designer, black liquid silk with intricate gold embroidery weaving Igbo and Korean motifs into a single language of power. Her braids were styled in an elaborate crown threaded with thin gold chains. On her right hand, a ring featuring a black diamond worth more than most of the buildings on the block. She looked like exactly what she was. A queen who had been playing peasant. And she was done playing. The ballroom went silent as she took the podium. She could see them all. Every person who had laughed. Every person who had recorded her humiliation. And there, front row, Cha Yanawa. Her face the color of chalk. Adora's gaze found her. And Adora smiled. The same calm, devastating smile from the penthouse floor. Good afternoon. My name is Adora Akwim. Some of you have seen me before. I was at a gathering recently. I was wearing a cotton sundress. I was told I smelled like marsh water and poverty. I was shoved to the floor. And every person in that room laughed. Dead silence. I let it happen. Not because I was weak. But because I wanted to see who you were when you thought nobody who mattered was watching. She let the words settle like stones into still water. Now you know who I am. And I know exactly who you are. She pivoted to business. A 500 billion won investment into Korea. Partnerships. Innovation. She spoke with the authority of someone who had built the impossible and the passion of someone who believed in what she was building. When she finished, the room was on its feet. But Adora was not done. She moved through the crowd toward Yanawa, who was trying to reach a side exit. Adora's security sealed it before she got there. Yanawa turned, cornered. Her face was a mask of barely controlled terror. Going somewhere? Adora asked. Listen, I didn't know. You didn't need to know who I was to treat me like a human being. Adora's voice dropped to a level only Yanawa could hear. But let's skip past the penthouse. Let's skip past the insults. Let's talk about the 2 men you sent to my apartment to kill me 3 nights ago. Every trace of color drained from Yanawa's face. I broke one's wrist and the other's nose, Adora said conversationally. They're currently in police custody and they are talking. I also have your communications. Your financial transfers. The names of everyone involved. Everything has already been shared with prosecutors. You can't. Your father is going to prison. Your fortune is gone. Your social standing is about to become a cautionary tale that people whisper about at dinner parties you will never again be invited to. Adora leaned close. And the man you were so desperate to claim? He was never yours. Yanawa's composure shattered completely. Tears of impotent fury streamed down her face. You don't know who you're dealing with. Adora straightened to her full height. You're right. You never did. She turned and walked away. And behind her, Cha Yanawa's universe began its permanent, irreversible collapse. But none of it, not the financial destruction, not the press conference, not the public humiliation of the woman who had humiliated her, was the real mission. The real mission was Dubam. Adora went to the Cha estate alone. Boyong argued against it. Dohan nearly lost his mind over it. They had their worst argument about it in his hammock, voices bouncing off the ancient beams. "I'm not letting you walk into that compound alone," he shouted. "This is my brother. If I show up with armed men, he sees me as an enemy. And if someone in that compound tries to hurt you?" Adora looked at him steadily. "Then they will regret it more than the last two people who tried." He grabbed her and kissed her, hard and desperate. "If anything happens to you, nothing will happen. I promise. I'm coming back. You better." She arrived at the Cha estate on a gray Tuesday morning. The security at the gate tried to stop her. She said her name. Within 3 minutes, the gates opened. She found Dubam in Ilsung's study. Tall. Lean. When he turned, Adora felt the breath leave her body. He looked like their father. The same jaw. The same deep-set eyes. But his expression carried a hardness that was learned, not born, the callus that forms over a wound that was never allowed to heal. "I know who you are," he said in Korean. "Yanawa told me. You're the woman destroying everything." "I'm your sister," Adora replied in Igbo. "Nwannem. My mother's child." He flinched as if struck. "Don't speak that language to me. It's your language, Dubam. It was the first language you ever heard. Mama used to sing you to sleep in Igbo. Nwamibukka. Mother, 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 my great child. Stop it. Your name means, lead me. Our mother chose it because you were her firstborn. I don't have a family." His composure cracked wide open. "I was left. I was discarded. I was a broken boy in a hospital bed and nobody came. Because they told us you were dead." Adora's voice broke. Neoma held a funeral. She buried an empty casket. She has lit a candle for you every single night for 22 years. Your room is still there. Your shoes by the door. Your drawings on the refrigerator. She kept everything because she couldn't let you go, even in death. Dubam pressed his hands against the window glass. His reflection stared back at him, fractured by rain beginning to streak the surface. Ilsung said she chose. He said she took the girl and left the boy. He lied. He stole you from a hospital bed and spent 22 years poisoning you against the people who loved you most. And the restaurant you destroyed? Neoma's table? That was your grandmother's heart. You broke your own grandmother's heart because a man who kidnapped you told you she didn't love you. The sound he made was not human. It was the sound of 22 years of lies collapsing simultaneously. He sank to his knees, and Adora went to him. She knelt beside her brother for the first time in 22 years and wrapped her arms around him, and he collapsed into her, and the grief that poured out of him was oceanic, the grief of a child who had been waiting in the dark for someone to come and had finally heard the door open. "I didn't know," he gasped. "I believed him. I did terrible things. You were a child. He twisted you. None of it is your fault. Can she forgive me? Mama Neoma, can she? She already has. She forgave you before she even knew you were alive, because that is who she is. That is who we are, Dubam. We are Aqueems. And we do not abandon each other. Ever." They held each other on the floor of their enemy's study, and the sound of their weeping was the most beautiful, devastating, human thing in the world. Cha Il-sung was arrested at his estate that evening. Yanawa was arrested 2 days later. Charges included conspiracy, fraud, attempted murder, and international kidnapping. At the arrest, Adora stood at the estate gates. She watched Il-sung emerge in handcuffs, his face collapsed. He saw her. Recognition dawned. "You," he whispered. "The swamp girl," she said. "Remember me now?" He had no answer. There was no answer. The car door closed. He was gone. And Adora felt the stone in her chest finally dissolve. 2 weeks later, she brought Dubam home to Meridian Island. The flight was long and mostly silent. He gripped the armrests like a man bracing for impact. Adora held one of those white-knuckled hands and didn't push him to speak. She drove him across the crumbling bridge, past the live oaks and the marsh, to the care facility on the mainland. She walked him down the hallway. Stopped outside the room. She might not recognize you immediately, Adora said gently. Dubam's eyes were red. His hands shook violently. What if she hates me? She has loved you every single day for 22 years. That is the only certain thing in this entire world. Go. He pushed open the door. Neoma was in her chair by the window, small and fragile. She turned at the sound. Her eyes went wide. Dubam? Barely a breath. NWAM? My boy? He fell to his knees beside her chair. Her frail hands reached for his face and cupped it with a strength that had no business existing in fingers so thin. My boy, she wept. You came home. You came home to me. Mama Neoma. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Shoo, NWAM. You're here now. You're home. She pulled his head to her chest and held him, and the strength that returned to her was miraculous, as if love itself were reconstructing her from the inside out. Adora watched from the doorway, tears streaming silently down her face. 2 arms slid around her from behind. Dohan. He had followed them. Of course he had. He pressed his lips to her temple and held her while she watched her family reassemble from the fragments that cruelty had scattered across 2 decades and 2 continents. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For standing beside me. Even when I lied. Even when you were hurt. Even when every rational reason said to walk away. He turned her to face him. I knew who you were. Not the name. Not the company. Not the money. I knew who you were the moment I watched you get up off that penthouse floor and walk out with your head high. You were the strongest person in the room. The only real thing in the room. He paused. You were everything I'd been looking for my entire life and didn't know existed. She kissed him in that hallway, soft and sweet, with the sound of her grandmother's laughter drifting through the open door. 6 months later, Adora stood on the porch of a newly rebuilt Neoma's table. Not the old one. A new one, larger, on a prime piece of waterfront property on Meridian Island. The same recipes. The same soul. But with a new addition, a Korean-Nigerian low-country fusion menu developed by Adora, Dubam, and Dohan together. Neoma sat at the best table, Dubam beside her, presiding over the grand reopening like the queen she had always been. Her health had improved remarkably. The doctors called it unusual. Neoma called it simple. Love is the only medicine that works, she said. I've been telling everybody this for 83 years and nobody listens. Dohan stood beside Adora on the porch, watching the Meridian Island sunset paint the marsh in shades of amber and rose. Spanish moss swayed. The air smelled of salt water and Neoma's pepper soup. I've been thinking, Dohan said. Dangerous activity for you. He ignored her. About how a man who spent his life in the dark ended up standing in the most beautiful light he's ever seen, next to the most extraordinary woman he's ever known, on an island that most maps don't include. He reached into his pocket. And I've been thinking that if I don't do this right now, I'll lose my nerve, and I have never lost my nerve, so you have clearly ruined me. Adora's breath caught. Dohan. He opened the box. A delicate band of gold and platinum intertwined, set with a warm amber stone the color of the sunset currently pouring across the marsh. The gold is from Nigeria, he said, and his voice, the voice that commanded empires and terrified nations, trembled. The platinum is from Korea. The stone is from Georgia. 3 places. 1 ring. 1 life. Ours. He paused. If you'll have me. You're not on your knees, she said. And Dohan, the man who never smiled, smiled. Full. Unreserved. Luminous. He sank to one knee on the porch of Neoma's table, with the sunset behind him and the marsh stretching to the horizon and his entire impossible future in the eyes of the woman above him. Adora Akwim. Daughter of the people. Daughter of the swamp. Owner of everything, including my heart. Will you marry me? She pulled him to his feet and kissed him so fiercely that the people inside erupted in cheers before she said the word. Yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit like it had been waiting for her hand since the day it was made. He lifted her and spun her, and she laughed, that full, bright, unguarded laugh he had fallen in love with in a tea shop in Seoul, and the cheers grew louder, and Dubum was grinning, and Neoma's voice carried above it all. Finally. Now bring that boy inside. He is too skinny. Has nobody been feeding him? Dohan set Adora down but kept his arms around her, forehead pressed to hers. She's going to try to feed me into a coma, isn't she? Every single day for the rest of your life. Good. He kissed her forehead. I've been hungry for a long time. They walked inside together, into the warmth and noise and love of a restaurant rebuilt from ashes, a family restored from fragments, a life forged in fire and deception and truth and the stubborn, magnificent refusal to stop choosing each other. She was mocked. She was shoved to the floor. She was underestimated, dismissed, hunted, shot at, and nearly destroyed. She got up every single time. Because power is not money. Power is not weapons. Power is not the penthouse or the title or the empire. Power is a girl from a swamp island that most maps don't include, standing in a room full of people who think she is nothing, and knowing with absolute, unshakable certainty that she is everything. And love, real love, the kind that survives secrets and betrayal and silence and fear and 2 assassins through a window at midnight? That love doesn't just survive. It wins. Now if this story broke you and rebuilt you and left you sitting there with tears on your face and fire in your chest, I need you to do 3 things right now. 1. Smash that like button until your screen cracks. 2. Subscribe to this channel because the stories we tell here are not just stories, they are experiences, and you are now part of this family. 3. Drop a comment and tell me your favorite moment. The penthouse floor. The tea shop. The brother reveal. The fight scene. That proposal on the porch. Tell me everything. Share this with someone who needs to hear a story about a woman who refused to stay down. And I will see you in the next one. Love you all.